Joining us tonight, our special guest, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, professor of political economy at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, the co-author of the new book entitled Political Risk: How Businesses and Organizations Can Anticipate Global Insecurity. Great to see you.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Congratulations on the book. And it's the idea that organizations have got to contend with all that this world represents right now has got to be daunting even to the largest and most sophisticated organizations, corporations, businesses.
Absolutely. It used to be in the 70s or the late 60s, we would think of political risk and you would think, well, there's going to be a socialist dictator who's going to expropriate my property and, and nationalize my industry. Well, that's really not the risk these days. The sources of risk are just multiplying. Who would have thought that a great power behaving badly like the Russians, trying to interfere in American political space, would use the platforms of social media to do it, and that would become then a risk for those social media providers. And so the sources are just multiplying. You look at anybody with a cell phone can be a political reporter now and cause risk.
Or a documentary maker.
Or a documentary maker. Just ask United Airlines about that.
Exactly. And at this point, even the most sophisticated organizations, and we will, for purposes of argument, include governments in that regard. You know, I'm curious as to whether or not you ever imagined we would see a moment in American history in which we have a new administration contending with Russia, with China, including the South Sea, really the expansionary policies of the Chinese and the American response, North Korea, Iran, and at the same time contending for a structure, an architecture for a Middle East peace plan that rises above, all simultaneously.
All simultaneously. And interlocking in some ways as well. The thing that we have to remember is that the United States has been the guardian of a political order that we helped to create after World War II.
Right.
And it was a political order that was very much dependent on the United States and American military power to protect free markets and free peoples. And we are seeing now a lot of challenges to that. I don't think I believed we were going to see great power rivalry of the kind that we're seeing from China and Russia. I think we thought that those days were behind us. So yes, things have changed dramatically in the last several years.
With the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Soviet Union, there seemed to be sort of rather than a bright initiative moving forward from government, there was more a sigh of relief and an aversion to risking both capital and initiative with the former Soviet Union. It was, in my opinion, a tremendous opportunity lost for which we're now paying something of a price. With China, this president has been the disruptive force he was elected to be.
Yes.
And he's enjoying extraordinary success.
Well, with China, you're seeing a rising power. And the Chinese are challenging in all kinds of ways. And, you know, the Chinese have benefited greatly from this international economic order.
The greatest transfer of technology, knowledge, and wealth in the history of the world.
And they've lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. And we have to remember that the Chinese leadership, the Chinese Communist Party, gets its legitimacy from prosperity. And so it has to keep trying to deliver for its people. Now, in doing that, the Chinese have not always been on the right side of the rules of the international economy. So the stealing of intellectual,
thieves. They have been wanton
property,
in their espionage.
There's been
a
lot of behavior that I think none of us would really welcome. But they're also a very big part of international economic growth. And so it's actually a very complex relationship to manage.
A complex relationship, and yet I have never seen an administration, frankly, contend so well with all of the challenges, whether they're rivals, economic competitors, or outright enemies, and we can include, of course, the Iranians in that regard, North Korea. Russia is trying to figure out who it wants to be and what it will be allowed to be by this administration. It seems to me that President Trump has made it very clear he will be a constraining force, in a countervailing force to either the expansionist desires of both China or Russia.
Well, let me just say, as someone who was National Security Advisor and Secretary of State, it's still early. The administration has a
Isn't
lot
it
of work to do.
isn't it always?
It's always
Isn't it
early.
always?
The administration has a lot of work to do. They've had some real successes. I actually think on North Korea, the reason that we are where we are is because the president recognizing that no American president could allow the North Koreans to get a nuclear weapon capable of reaching the United States. And so, frankly, he raised the stakes. He said to the Chinese, this is not about you do what you have to do to stop the North Koreans or the regime collapses. This is about potential war on the peninsula. And
But isn't it important for us to put in context when he did that? And that was within less than a year of going into office.
No, it was a very important thing to do.
And the fact of the matter is, it was the passive, the strategic patience of the Obama administration that permitted just the advance both in ballistic missiles and nuclear weaponry on the part of the North Koreans.
Well, we all have some to pay for that.
The predecessor administration.
Before. Look, we tried to stop the North Korean regime. We did in building those nuclear. I think I was the last Secretary of State to actually negotiate with the North Koreans in 2008, 2009. It's just a very hard problem because it's an opaque regime. You sanction it. What do they do if you take away food from their people? As long as it doesn't hurt the regime, they really don't care. And the one thing that I would say to President Trump as he goes on this mission now to try to perhaps even end war on the peninsula, the state of war on the peninsula, and to end nuclear weapons on the peninsula, is never forget the character of this regime.
Yeah.
Never forget that this is a regime that murdered an American citizen just a short time ago, and that this is a regime that is tough-minded and, in fact, very clever. So be well prepared when you go into that room with Kim Jong-un.
So far, I would say this president has been well prepared.
So far,
both by nature and by direction.
So far, and I'm just saying, make sure that when you talk to Kim Jong-un, you keep very much in mind who he is.
I hope he's watching you. Thanks so much,
Thank
Condoleezza
you.
Rice. Great
pleasure.
The book is Political Risk. We recommend it to you highly.